The defamation industry has been around for a very long time, all the way back to 1734, where John Peter Zenger was jailed for the printing of a criticism of the colonial governor. In 1735, he was acquitted by a jury with the help of a lawyer, Andrew Hamilton. His case was established that libel cases could be decided by a jury, determined by both verdict and damages. However, the Supreme Court didn't apply the First Amendment to libel cases for many years. The first case to be truly considered a defamation case in the United States was New York Times Company versus Sullivan, amidst the Civil Rights Movement. In 1960, New York Times published an editorial advertisement, a paid advertisement written in the style of a news article to promote a product or brand. The advertisement accused Montgomery, Alabama Police Department of several cruel acts toward African Americans. The city commissioner filed a libel suit against the New York Times for errors within the advertisement. Sullivan was awarded $500,000 by the jury, although the New York Times appealed the verdict all the way to the Supreme Court. Under definition, defamation is when an individual or company makes a false claim about another person to a third party or parties, injuring the person's reputation, and can be written or said through claims or statements. One of the most recent and well-known defamation cases, I guess depending on who you ask, is the U.S. Dominion versus Fox News. Dominion wished for $1.6 billion in damages, alleging Fox News had broadcasted false statements, claiming Dominion's voting machines had been rigged for the 2020 presidential election.
After Fox began giving the allegations extensive coverage, let's get that up there for you, Dominion started sending the network fact-checking emails and retraction requests, which the company alleges were ignored. Dominion argued in a court filing that 19 of the 20 broadcasts it claims were defamatory occurred after the company began sending fact-checking emails. Eventually, Dominion filed defamation suits against organizations and people it felt were responsible for spreading these conspiracy theories, and that, of course, included Fox News, Sidney Powell, and One America News Network.
Fox argued it was all pure opinion, lacking any and all factuality. But anyway, in the end, Fox paid out $787.5 million, and the case is known as the largest media settlement for defamation in the history of the U.S. Depending on who you ask, the most recent and well-known case could be CoffeeZilla versus Logan Paul, who is suing CoffeeZilla for defamation over his videos regarding the crypto zoo, claiming there were false published statements accusing Paul of operating a scam. Like any industry, the legal field has its own faults and errors. Sometimes the best way to handle a very mean person is to turn the situation into a courtroom drama, complete with a hefty bill and a public audience. The following defamation cases involve darker stories, unsolved mysteries, and just pure internet spite. May 5, 1993, three 8-year-olds, Christopher Byers, Michael Moore, and Stevie Branch, were riding their bikes in West Memphis. When they didn't return home that evening, their parents reported the boys missing. 1 day later, they were found. Police reported they had been murdered. Their bodies had been beaten and mutilated. They also believed the murders were connected to a satanic worshipping cult. Immediately, the police suspect 18-year-old Damian Eccles, who was known for being a troublemaker and a Wiccan. He also had a history of mental illness and depression. Eccles denied knowing the boys or being involved in their deaths, but police didn't give up. They couldn't, and they kept Eccles as a suspect. The police received help from a child's friend of the victims, Vicki Hutchison, who had witnessed their murders but also unable to identify the murders. After hearing Eccles had been interviewed, she offered to play detective by meeting him. Upon meeting him, Hutchison enlisted Miss Kelly, a 17-year-old neighbor who knew him. On May 19th, Hutchison, Miss Kelly, and Eccles attended a gathering of the witches in a field. However, things turned sexual, and she asked Eccles to take her home. He did, but Miss Kelly stayed behind. When telling her story to the police, they had her take a polygraph exam, to which she passed. Police interviewed Miss Kelly, who supposedly had an IQ of 72. In the beginning, he denied his involvement, but not soon after, did confess to being involved, saying he had helped detain the three boys, but had left before the murders were committed, by which he said to be was Eccles and 16-year-old Jason Baldwin. All three were arrested in June, even though there is no physical evidence connecting them to the crime, as they each had alibis. Miss Kelly was tried separately, with his trial beginning in January of 1994. His attorney said his confession had been coerced and early versions of his statement were different from the physical evidence. He had falsely claimed the boys were essayed and tied up with rope instead of shoelaces, but police thought he was only confused. On February 4, he was found guilty of first-degree and second-degree murder, sentenced to life without the possibility of parole. Eccles and Baldwin's trial began shortly after. The prosecution was forced to rely on evidence from Eccles' interest in the occult as Miss Kelly refused to testify. The court introduced evidence in which they thought of as incriminating, being Eccles reading Stephen King and listening to Metallica. In jail, an inmate said Baldwin actually confessed to the murders, and 2 girls had claimed they heard Eccles confessing to the murders during a softball game. New suspects were introduced, such as a local teen who had left for California shortly after the bodies were discovered, but wasn't allowed to testify before the jury. On the 18th of March, 1994, Eccles and Baldwin were found guilty of first-degree murder. Eccles, who was seen as the leader of it all, was sentenced to death, while Baldwin was given life without parole. However, the case wasn't over because 8 years later, in 2004, Hutchison claimed she had lied at the urging of the police and that, allegedly, she was going to be thrown into the case if she did not cooperate. But nothing more came from the case until 2007. Due to more advanced technology, the case was further examined. A strand of hair found in one of the victims was sent to DNA testing. It was found that the strand of hair did not belong to Eccles, Miss Kelly, or Baldwin, but it did belong to a man by the name of Terry Hobbs, stepfather to boy Stevie Branch. However, Hobbs denied any and all involvement in the murders. A judge overturned convictions in 2011 because the jury improperly brought up Miss Kelly's confession, which shouldn't have been even considered in the cases. Eccles, Baldwin, and Miss Kelly had pled guilty but maintained their innocence in the case. As a result, they were released on the same day after each was sentenced to their time served and received a 10-year suspended sentence. Since the conviction, there have been a parade of celebrities fighting for the freedom of the convicted killers. The case involving defamation involves Terry Hobbs and Natalie Maines, also a singer of the Dixie Chicks, where in 2011, Hobbs felt the woman went too far as she tried to pin the murder on him. He sued for defamation, but things did not go as planned. He claimed Maines accused him of the killings in a letter posted on the band's website. A federal judge decided she was innocent and ordered Hobbs to pay her legal fees of around $17,000. The 3 boys, now men, are free today. They served decades in prison, all while maintaining their innocence. It is still unclear who was responsible for the murders of Christopher Byers, Michael Moore, and Stevie Branch. Stephen Avery, who was born July of 1962 in Wisconsin, reportedly had an IQ of 70. He had dropped out of high school around the 11th grade, where he went on to fulfill a life, or what life he had left, in crime. Not long after dropping out of high school in 1981, he was convicted of stealing from a bar and served 10 months in jail. Only 1 year later, he pled guilty to animal cruelty after pouring gasoline on a cat and tossing the animal into a bonfire. He was only sentenced to 9 months. Then, in 1985, he had another run-in with the law. He held his cousin, Sandra Morris, at gunpoint, forcing her to drive off the road and claimed she was spreading rumors about him. 1 year earlier, Sandra Morris filed a complaint against Avery, claiming he had exposed himself on multiple occasions. In return, he received a 6-year sentence, but paid his bail. That same year, on July 29, a woman by the name of Penny Bjornson was violated on a beach. She gave the police a description of her attacker, which was said to resemble Avery, who was found and arrested. The location of the beach was also near Avery's property. However, 16 individuals said Avery was somewhere else at the time of the attack. A forensic official claimed a hair was found on Avery's shirt. The case was put to a temporary rest, where in December of 1985, he was convicted and sentenced to 32 years. Some were doubtful of his crime. They believed it wasn't him, but another man in the area, Gregory A. Allen, who looked similar to Avery and was also suspected of other sex crimes. But law enforcement did not investigate Allen. Avery maintained his innocence, that he did not commit the crime. In 2001, the Wisconsin Innocence Project became aware of Avery's case, involving themselves to figure out if Avery was as innocent as he said. A court order was granted for DNA testing for that hair found on the victim's shirt they claimed to be Avery's. With better technology existing, or at all, in September of 2003, lab testing found the hair match to be Gregory Allen, who happened to be in prison for sexual assault at the time of their findings. As a result, charges against Avery were dropped and he was released from prison. The suspect was not Avery, after all. Once out of prison, he filed a $36 million wrongful conviction lawsuit against the county, district attorney, and the sheriff. Throughout the legal proceedings, they found that in 1995, Allen did confess in another county, which somebody else was convicted for, but authorities never pursued the claim.
What do you hope comes from this?
Something good. I suffered long enough for 18 years, so I'll just have to wait a little bit more.
On Halloween of 2005, with Avery's civil case still ongoing, a freelance photographer by the name of Teresa Hallback drove to Avery's auto salvage, also where Avery and his family members lived, to photograph a van he wanted to list in Auto Trader magazine. The woman took the photographs, left, and was never seen again. Not by Avery, his family, or anyone beyond the auto shop. On November 3rd, a missing persons report was filed and a search party was formed to find her. 2 days later, her vehicle was found at the auto salvage. The following week, her car key was discovered in Avery's home, along with blood, though his own, which was found in her car. Human bones were recovered in a fire pit near his home, those of which they determined to belong to Halbach. A bullet was found in Avery's garage, which also included her DNA. Avery was arrested, and while in jail, his civil suit case settled for $400,000. In March of 2006, Avery's 16-year-old nephew, Brandon Dassey, told police and detectives that both he and Avery had violated and murdered Halbach before burning her body. Dassey was interviewed without legal representation, a legal guardian by his side. He later denied his own statement. It's also worth noting he supposedly had an IQ of 73. He was charged with all the crimes, though there wasn't any physical evidence used against him. Avery maintained his innocence. He even accused law officials of framing him to sabotage his civil suit. His attorneys argued the blood found in Halbach's car was sampled from the 1985 case. The car key was found by 2 police officers, though those officers testified in Avery's civil suit. After a 27-day trial, Avery was found guilty of murder and in illegal possession of a firearm in March of 2007. He received life in prison without the possibility of parole. Dassey, his now 17-year-old nephew, was found guilty and given a life term to be eligible for parole in 2048. Their case grew more attention in 2015 as Making a Murderer aired on Netflix. However, many involved in the case objected to how they were portrayed in the show, claiming evidence was omitted in which supported Avery's conviction. In August of 2016, Dassey's conviction was overturned by a federal judge who ruled the confession was illegally obtained. However, authorities were given 90 days to either schedule a new trial or let him go by an appellate court, but authorities appealed. The case continued to go through court, reaching the U.S. Court of Appeals in 2017. They ruled in Dassey's favor, upholding his conviction 6 months later. In June of 2018, the U.S. Supreme Court denied Dassey's appeal. Those legal battles are featured in Making a Murderer Part 2. That same year, Netflix and the series producers were sued for defamation by Andrew Colborn. Colborn was a former police officer who had testified at Avery's murder trial. The lawsuit claims the series committed and distorted evidence to make him appear as a corrupt officer, but the case was dismissed. The judge found that he had failed to provide enough evidence on Netflix or the filmmakers acting in malice. Many are on the theory that police framed Avery for a murder he did not commit. While he is in prison for life, with no way out, he continues to seek appeals for a murder he did or did not commit. Reddit is known as a platform for free speech, until it isn't. Within that platform, there are subreddits known for things that go beyond the border of controversial, but perhaps illegal. A handful of those controversial subreddits, known as creepshots and jailbait, held thousands of active users and even more viewers, but Reddit, being a platform of anonymity, it was unclear who ran those subreddits. That was until Adrian Chen, an American blogger for Gawker and known for writing stories on internet culture, found out the user's identity who ran those very controversial subreddits. His expose on the Silk Road discussed the website's content, a place on the dark net one could purchase drugs. As a result, U.S. senators called for the site to be shut down. His efforts and research marked success in his career, as 1 year later, he discovered the identity of a Reddit moderator, one who moderated several controversial subreddits as spoken of previously. The subreddits he, the moderator, moderated contained shots of underage girls or women in public wearing scantily clothing, all under the username Violent Acres. Chen listened to a podcast containing several Reddit users, including Violent Acres. Then, after having retrieved his contact information, heard the moderator speak. He knew he had his match. His name was Michael Brush, and he was a husband and a father. Chen called to arrange a phone interview, telling he had found out his identity. Brush was nervous, even having told Chen that. One of his subreddits, Jailbait, was previously called out on CNN by Anderson Cooper, who questioned Reddit for allowing this type of stuff on their platform, and the moderator, Violent Acres, for creating it. As a response, the subreddit was banned. While on their phone call, Brush claimed he was not a violator, comparing the photos on the subreddit to those of child celebrities, and that he had found them elsewhere, like through 4chan, also claiming he never allowed for CP on his subreddit. Many of his subreddits were visited out of pure interest. He claimed they were created to enrage users, which did happen. He claimed people took things way too seriously, that he wasn't surprised by the outrage on the posts, having seen it all the time. He held a close relationship with the administrators from Reddit, saying they looked the other way in regards to the content he posted and subreddits he managed. But after the jailbait controversy, he claimed to be cut off from those administrators who've been burned by the controversy. He said the admins kept their distance for a while, and that the site wasn't what it used to be. Michael Brush was seen as a trustworthy and positive member of the community, having many friends on the platform and moderating 400 subreddits. During their call, the moderator pleaded with Chen to not let his identity out as his wife is disabled. He has a home, a mortgage, a job, all at risk of losing. Chen then asked if he regretted anything that he had posted, to which he said no. He wanted to keep his identity to protect his ability to express himself. Speaking of his personal life, his feelings, Chen claimed at the beginning the conversation was supposed to be civil and friendly, but had swiveled down into a rant. He was only interested in signaling him out for his controversy surrounding creep shots. After their phone call, an interview was arranged. Brush asked if Chen was going to out him, adding he wasn't worried about his immediate family finding out, as his teenage son thought he was a creep anyway. His current wife knows of what he does online, even stating his wife and son participated in an Ask Me Anything, which Chen was second-guessing if it was all orchestrated by him. Brush even claimed the Reddit admins has his name, as a way to prove he had nothing to hide. Before the article was published, Gawker was banned from over 60 subreddits. Following the article's publishing, Brush shut down his Reddit account only 6 days after they had spoken, claiming the site stopped being fun a while ago. The outing of Brush led to those claiming Chen had doxed him and were upset with Gawker for allowing it. Brush lost his job, even receiving threats against him and his family. Chen's decision to dox him was highly controversial and sparked debates on the ethics of revealing an identity and the boundaries of journalistic responsibility. He was both praised and criticized. The Choose Your Own Adventure game Depression Quest was released February of 2013. The game, as described in the title, is about a person struggling with depression. There are a series of events and players. Readers have to attempt to manage their illness, relationships, job, and potential treatment. The game's developer, Zoe Quinn, thought the narrative was an accurate portrayal of depression. After attempting to publish the game twice, once in December of 2013 and the other in August of 2014, it was then accepted by Steam. For some reason, Depression Quest was featured in a Playboy article. On Steam, the game has mixed reviews, claiming the intent of the game is clear and balanced, but the execution is a wreck. I remember playing the game when I was younger. It bore me. But there are those who did enjoy the game, claiming it had an accurate portrayal of depression. Following the release of the game, Quinn faced harassment. They even withdrew the game from Steam's Greenlight service after receiving violation threats. When having brought the game back, they received threatening phone calls. That same month of release, a former boyfriend of Quinn's, Iran Joni, published a blog post about their relationship. In it, he accused Quinn of receiving positive coverage from a journalist they were seeing. The journalist, Nathan Grayson, had written about Quinn before being in a relationship with them. The accusation sparked the harassment campaign, Gamergate. Quinn received more harassment such as doxing and death threats. As a response to it all, Quinn had to leave her home. In a BBC News interview, they said the harassment consumed their life, that they felt surrounded by hate all the time, claiming Gamergate targeted people with the least power in the industry. Following all that hate and doxing, in 2015, Quinn became a co-founder of Crash Override, a network to assist victims of online harassment, and has since spoken at more conferences. Depression Quest has been their only game as of 2024, and it doesn't look like they are releasing another game anytime soon. The defamation industry is a fun one, at least for those on the outside. Sometimes it's all purely out of spite and hate for one another. Other times it's needed if there's been some serious harm done to the other person's reputation. While 2 of the 4 controversies involved true crime, or I suppose you could say the 3rd and 4th did involve crime, they also, and obviously, included defamation. While Terry Hobbs was already under questioning as the murderer of the 3 boys, I don't think he should have had to pay Natalie Maines' legal fees after she accused him of being the murderer. The cop from Stephen Avery's case accused Netflix of distorting evidence and making him appear corrupt, but he did not have the evidence to prove anything, and so the whole case was rather a bother for everybody involved. Then there's the doxing of Michael Brush, and while not illegal or having a lawsuit, was another example of a defamation case which can be argued was for the good or bad. All was leaked was a name, but it's what the others did that turned into more being leaked: phone number, home address, and a job. Zoe Quinn, and in my opinion, made a bad game. But just because they made a bad game doesn't mean all the threats and doxing were deserved. Defamation is a negative issue as it involves making false statements that harm someone's reputation. But from an outside perspective looking in, it's certainly more entertaining and amusing, and with social media in its high for whoever knows how long, the worldwide nation of defamation continues.